Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're diving into an epic story inspired by the book The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism by Paul Kengor. This film takes us through the life of one of America's most iconic presidents, Ronald Reagan, and his role in the Cold War. From his humble beginnings in Illinois to his rise in Hollywood and ultimately his time in the Oval Office, this movie explores Reagan's relentless fight against communism and his pivotal role in the fall of the Soviet Union. Whether you're a history buff or just love a good story, this is one you won't want to miss. So sit back, relax, and let's jump into the incredible journey of the Crusader. Ronald Reagan. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan of the United States of America gave a speech at the Washington Hilton as part of the AFL-CIO's building and construction trades. As he was leaving the hotel, he was shot and wounded, despite the fact that initial television reports stated that he had escaped without any injuries. As Andrei Novikov, a Russian agent, arrives at the residence of Viktor Petrovich, a former KGB agent in the present day in Moscow, he inquires about the reasons behind the collapse of the Soviet Union. Petrovich, who was tasked with the responsibility of monitoring Reagan, addresses the Soviet Union's previous aspirations to infiltrate both Washington, District of Columbia, and Hollywood. The details of Reagan's childhood in northern Illinois are provided by Petrovich. The values of Christianity are instilled in Ronald Reagan by his mother, Nell, despite the fact that his father, Jack, was an alcoholic. Reagan is baptized by Reverend Cleaver and transforms into a born-again Christian. He then goes on to work as a radio announcer and as a lifeguard. Following his relocation to Hollywood, he began his career as an actor for Warner Brothers. It was in 1947 that Ronald Reagan was elected president of the Screen Actors Guild. This was during a period in which Reagan's status as a leading man was deteriorating after World War II. During the time of the Hollywood blacklist, Ronald Reagan became an FBI informant and engaged in a long-running feud with Herbert Sorrell, a union organizer. As a result of Reagan's involvement in politics and the untimely passing of their daughter Christine, the marriage between the actor and the actress Jane Wyman ultimately results in divorce. In 1949, Ronald Reagan's name was removed from the blacklist after she was mistaken for another Nancy Davis. This occurred after Reagan had a meeting with the actress Nancy Davis. They tie the knot in the year 1952. During this time, Ronald Reagan began his career in television, where he hosted the General Electric Theater program and appeared in commercials. It is in 1964 that Ronald Reagan delivers his A Time for Choosing speech while simultaneously campaigning for the Republican presidential nominee Barry Goldwater. In 1966, Ronald Reagan makes the decision to run for governor of California after having a discussion about his political future. In 1969, Governor Ronald Reagan is confronted by student radicals at the University of California, Berkeley. In response, he orders the State National Guard to be dispatched to the campus in order to put an end to the demonstrations. The Reagans pray with Pat Boone and Pastor George K. Otis in the year 1970. Otis makes a prediction that Ronald Reagan will become president if he walks uprightly before God. At the Republican National Convention 6 years later, Ronald Reagan challenges the incumbent president Gerald Ford for the nomination of the Republican Party. However, he is unsuccessful in his bid due to the delegate count. Carter, a Democrat, defeats Ford in the election, and Ronald Reagan makes another run for the presidency in 1980. During this time, he is able to defeat Carter and develop a friendship with Tip O'Neill, who is the Democratic Speaker of the House. A return to 1981 is made in the film. The visit from O'Neill takes place in the hospital bed of President Ronald Reagan, who is recuperating from the attempted assassination he attempted. When Reagan returned to the White House, he had a disagreement with David Stockman, who was the director of the White House budget, regarding his proposal to reduce taxes. After learning that air traffic controllers are on strike, Ronald Reagan decides to terminate the employment of those air traffic controllers who do not return to their jobs within 48 hours. In order to handle diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union, Ronald Reagan chooses George Shultz to serve as his Secretary of State. In the present day, Petrovich talks about how Ronald Reagan became obsessed with communism. He traces his obsession all the way back to a talk that was given by a Russian refugee at the church that he attended. Through the Hollywood Union disputes and the countless books he reads about the party, this undercurrent remained consistent throughout the entire process. The reason that Petrovich had given him the nickname the Crusader is because of this, and he continues to use this term whenever he talks about Reagan to Novikov. Despite the fact that Shultz was involved, Ronald Reagan referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire in the year 1983. After Soviet interceptor planes shot down a Korean air passenger plane that was carrying a congressman from the United States of America, tensions between the United States of America and the Soviet Union escalated. Protests are taking place all over the country in response to the way that Ronald Reagan has handled the AIDS crisis. Ronald Reagan is victorious in his bid for re-election in 1984, defeating Walter Mondale, the Democratic nominee for president, as a result of the fact that Leonid Brezhnev's successors had already passed away while in office by the time Ronald Reagan was in his second term. The process of diplomacy became more challenging. Reagan lamented, "How can I negotiate with them if they keep dying on me?" Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is the one who convinces Ronald Reagan to meet with Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union. There are goldfish in the house where the Reagans are staying, and Ronald Reagan has promised to personally feed them. The event will take place in Geneva, Switzerland. A handwritten note is left by Reagan, apologizing to the boy to whom the fish belonged and promising to send him new fish. This occurs despite the fact that Reagan has made every effort to prevent the death of one of the fish. During the Geneva summit in 1985, the two leaders negotiate nuclear disarmament. However, Ronald Reagan is hesitant to sign an agreement because of his support for the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, which was formerly known as Star Wars. 12 months later, the Iran-Contra scandal is revealed, and President Ronald Reagan is threatened with impeachment. In an Oval Office speech, Ronald Reagan denies that there was a trade of arms for hostages, but he later retracts his statement. In spite of Schultz's opposition, Ronald Reagan gives a speech close to the Brandenburg Gate in which he demands that Gorbachev bring down the Berlin Wall. In 1989, Ronald Reagan resigns from his position as president, and shortly thereafter, the Berlin Wall collapses. 2 years later, the Soviet Union would be dissolved. Reagan discovers that he has Alzheimer's disease after experiencing memory lapses during his retirement years. He also learns that he has the disease. John Barletta, the only member of the Secret Service who was able to ride horses, takes Ronald Reagan on his final horseback ride. Barletta was Reagan's Secret Service agent. In 2004, Ronald Reagan passed away, and those who were influential around the world came to pay their respects at his funeral. During the closing credits, archival photographs and additional information are displayed. These include, for example, the fact that Nell and Jack moved to Hollywood with Ronald Reagan, and that she responded to his fan mail and volunteered at prisons and hospitals. Additionally, Nancy survived him by 10 years and oversaw the construction of the Reagan Museum and Library in Simi Valley, California. In a scene that takes place after the credits have rolled, there is a photograph of the letter that the young boy wrote to President Ronald Reagan about the fish that had died and the replacements that Reagan had sent. Thank you for watching this recap. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more movie recaps. See you next time.